Good morning, and good afternoon, and good evening, whenever you're watching this. This is Kurt Berglund, and we are launching my channel today, focusing on baseball sims, and primarily, but not exclusively, on my favorite game, Pine Tar Baseball. We'll also be doing some other games as well, including APBA and Stratomatic, and some others, Clubhouse Baseball, which I've recently discovered, and some others that I've collected along the way that I'll be talking about in future installments. Today we're going to begin with a series from the Legends set of Pine Tar Baseball. The first Legends set, there's going to be a second Legends set released in 2020, and what I want to do is to give you a little bit of familiarity with the structure and the gameplay of Pine Tar Baseball, and also give you something that'll hopefully be entertaining to you. The Legends set has a lot of different options and ways to go, and what I've decided to do for this very first series is to create an old school World Series Best of 9 tournament with the American League and the National League stars from the Legends set squaring off against one another. But there are some special modifications that I've made for this series. So first of all, you should know that this is a best of 9 series, and that the game structure, the home and home structure, is going to be all one games. So the National League won the coin flip for the home field advantage. So they'll get game 1, American League gets game 2, National League gets game 3, and so on. And if it goes 9 games, the National League gets game 9. So the National League gets all the odd-numbered games, and the American League gets all of the even-numbered games in terms of home field advantage. Now, as far as the teams themselves, let's look at that. There are some rules that I've established for this Best of 9 series. First of all, each team has a 35-man roster. 15 of those 35 must be pitchers. So I've selected the pitchers that, frankly, I want for each of the 2 teams. Because there are 15 pitchers, and because one of the things that I'm trying to do in this series is to measure the depth of each team, there are some special rules. First of all, the first rule is that only 2 starters can start twice. Only 2 starting pitchers can start twice in the series. No other starter can start more than once. So, at most, and we'll see how this goes, I don't really have the starting pitching planned out too much yet, although I'll get back to that in a minute. The interesting piece to this is that the starting pitchers that start twice probably are going to be the best ones, but might be the ones that are just most effective for whatever reason, and we'll talk about how that looks later on. Relief pitchers on these 15-man staffs cannot pitch more than 6 of the 9 games. So once they get to their 6-game limit, they're done, if anybody does. And of course, we're following Pine Tar rules, which means that if you pitch 2 innings or more in a particular game, 6 outs in a particular game, you're out for the next game. So that's a piece to this as well. And we'll talk more about relief pitcher usage as we get a little bit further into the series, but just keep in the back of your mind that Mariano Rivera, for example, will not be closing all 9 games. That's not going to happen. They're going to have to stretch out the bullpen a little bit. As for position players, since there are 35-man rosters and since there are 15-man pitching staffs, that means that there's 20 position players for each team. There are at least 2 players per position. We are not going to play injuries, but there are at least 2 players per position. And the reason that's important is because the maximum number of games that any position player may start is 5. So, for example, Babe Ruth will not be starting all 9 games. And so we'll see how that kind of plays out as the series goes along and how desperate teams get, one side or the other might get to save themselves from elimination, and the strategy behind employing one player or another. So the key pieces are that only 2 starting pitchers can start twice. Everyone else has to start once. And no position player can start more than 5 of the 9 games. So we'll see that hopefully will add some more strategy to not only the starting lineup, but gameplay during the game as well. I have established and determined the first 3 starting pitchers for each team. In Game 1, the face-off, and again the National League is hosting, it'll be Lefty Grove for the American League against Pedro Martinez for the National League. That's Game 1. Game 2, when the American League hosts its first game, will be Sandy Koufax versus Walter Johnson. And Game 3, when we come back to the National League Park, it'll be Randy Johnson versus Pedro Martinez. And so, Game 3 will be Randy Johnson versus Greg Maddux. So it's Pedro Martinez, Sandy Koufax, and Greg Maddux in the first 3 games for the National League. And for the American League, it's Lefty Grove, Walter Johnson, and Randy Johnson. Starting with Game 4, we'll kind of see where things are, and although I doubt that it'll be 3-0 for either side, if it is, that may make a change, and they may come back with their first starter. I don't know. We'll see. The starting lineups for today in the first game. Oh, we should talk about roster construction first of all here too. So I'm going to show you the American League roster. First, so that you're familiar with a little bit of the names that are on each team. I'm going to let you guess what you need to guess about the construction of the lineups. But the American League pitchers are as, having trouble with my camera. Going to get better at this, hopefully. Very quickly, the American League roster looks like this. It'll be, the pitchers are Lefty Grove, Walter Johnson, Randy Johnson, Jim Palmer, Bob Feller, Cy Young, Nolan Ryan, Roger Clemens, Eddie Plank, Dennis Eckersley, Raleigh Fingers, Troy Percival, Dan Quisenberry, and Rich Gossage. And Mariano Rivera. That makes the 15-man pitching staff. For the position players, Yogi Berra, Ivan Rodriguez, Jimmy Fox, Lou Gehrig, Charlie Gehringer, Eddie Collins, Derek Jeter, Cal Ripken, George Brett, Wade Boggs, Carl Yastrzemski, Ricky Henderson, Ted Williams, Ty Cobb, Tris Speaker, Mickey Mantle, Joe DiMaggio, Babe Ruth, Frank Robinson, and Reggie Jackson. That makes up the American League 35-man team. For the National League, it'll be Pedro Martinez, Sandy Koufax, Greg Maddux, Tom Seaver, Carl Hubble, Bob Gibson, Christy Mathewson, Warren Spahn, Grover Cleveland Alexander, Lee Smith, Trevor Hoffman, Billy Wagner, Bruce Sutter, John Franco, and Hoyt Wilhelm. For the position players, Roy Campanella, Mike Piazza, Johnny Bench, Willie McCovey, Jackie Robinson, Joe Morgan, Honus Wagner, Rogers Hornsby, Ozzie Smith, Ernie Banks, Eddie Matthews, Mike Schmidt, Willie Stargell, Tony Gwynn, Stan Musial, Ken Griffey Jr., Hank Aaron, Willie Mays, and Andre Dawson. Those are the 235-man lineups. For the batting orders in Game 1, we have, for the American League, Wade Boggs leading off at third base, Derek Jeter batting second at shortstop, Ted Williams batting third in left field, Babe Ruth hitting cleanup in right field, Lou Gehrig batting fifth at first base, Joe DiMaggio batting sixth in center field, Eddie Collins batting seventh at second base, and Ivan Rodriguez catching, batting eighth, and Lefty Grove on the mound, batting ninth, no DH. For the National League, at home team, Jackie Robinson leading off at first base, Rogers Hornsby batting second at second base, Willie Mays batting third in center field, Hank Aaron batting fourth in left field, Mike Schmidt batting fifth at third base, Johnny Bench batting sixth behind the plate, Roberto Clemente batting seventh in right field, Honus Wagner batting eighth at shortstop, and Pedro Martinez batting ninth and doing the pitching. We'll be back in just a moment to get the game started.